So first thing, whenever you start thinking of modern physics, there are obviously a couple of important things that one should keep in mind. First of all, nature of particles themselves. What are particles? As in, are they actually particles or are they waves? So there's this set of experiments that one can do. For example, if you take electrons, what you can do is you can do an interference experiment with this. You can yeah, you can do an interference experiment with this. Essentially what that means is that, let's say you have an electron gun which is essentially shooting out electrons, let's say in this direction, and you keep a slit here, and then you have a screen. So this is the screen and this is the slit. This all is all in 2 dimension. In 3 dimensions, what this will look like is something like this. You have this thing here. You have the slit here, which essentially has a hole on top and a hole on bottom, and there is a screen behind it. So since it's difficult to draw, I am drawing everything in 2 dimensions. Okay, so what do you expect the distribution of the electrons should be? Well, we already know what will happen to light. For example, let's replace this electron gun with a light source. Let's say the light source is monochromatic and all the good properties that light sources have, they are coherent and blah, blah, blah. This is the light source. So what should be the end distribution that one should see?
Few of the light force will go beyond the slit and some will bounce back. Some won't go beyond it.
Yes, obviously. I mean, there are holes, so I mean, a lot of it will be absorbed by the surface. Yes, that's absolutely true. And some of it will essentially cross this part here, and some of it will cross this part here. So essentially, what you're saying is that you'll get so. Let's say this peak is the number of times a photon is hitting there, or an electron is hitting, or light is hitting there. So you'll get a peak here and a peak here. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
But that doesn't happen, right?
That light particle will be there, right? Dark and light.
Yes, this is what is expected. But what essentially one finds is an interference experiment. The weirdest thing is that you would expect that the center point will have, let's not a lot of photons, but as it turns out, the center point has the maximum amount of photons. And then you have lower parts. So essentially, this is what the kind of a distribution that one would see. One would see a very very bright thing in the center, then dark, then bright, then dark, then bright, then dark. So these are essentially the fringes that one gets. You know about this, right?
Yes, sir.
Lovely. Now, if we replace this light source now again with our electron gun, with our electron source or electron gun, what do you expect to happen? Well, we know that electron is a particle, and we know, well, okay, before we go to the electron, let's think about footballs, like little footballs. Like you're standing here, there's a football here, and let's say you keep a screen in front of you with a whole big hole here and a big hole here. Actually, let's make the hole sideways, because that will make more sense. Let's say you have a hole here and a hole here, and you have the background screen somewhere there. What would you expect? Actually, let's. So your screen will be somewhere here. This is, let's say, the wall. So you're shooting from here. You run here and you shoot the ball. Well, some balls will go through here. Some balls will go through here. What you'll see is a collection of ball here and a collection of ball here, which is essentially this kind of a thing that you were seeing here. With footballs, You will get this. This is essentially the the nature of being discrete. That this is discrete, but in a wave, in light, what you'll see is an interference pattern. What about somewhere in the middle? Light is really, really tiny and football is really, really big. What about somewhere in the middle? Let's say an electron. Now, what happens to the electron gun?
It will be collected like football ball.
Yes, one would think that, but one if actually goes ahead and does the experiment, what they see is that electrons actually form this interference pattern. If you actually go ahead and do this experiment, what you see is that electrons, and not only electrons, molecules, big molecules, molecules as big as C60. C60 is a big molecule. It has 60 carbon atoms, right? That is a big ass molecule. If you these are called buckyballs, right?
Yeah, I learned. We learned.
So if you can do this whole experiment with buckyballs, and what essentially you'll see is again the interference pattern emerges. And the weird thing is that let's say you have an electron gun, you might say that this interference pattern is happening in the case of light because there are so many photons that are going, so these photons are interacting with each other and there is something complicated that is going on. Even in case of electrons, one can explain it in a way that there are many electrons that have been shot, so they are interacting with each other also, so there's some weird interaction which is essentially causing this. But what essentially happens is that if you lower the intensity, if you lower the intensity, in the sense that let's say you're shooting 1 electron per minute, in the sense that in this whole experiment, at one point in time there is only 1 electron. You make sure you lower the intensity so much that you are making sure that in the whole apparatus there is only 1 electron. And then you go ahead and do this experiment for a long time, in the sense that 1 electron, then you stop, and then 1 electron again, then you stop, and then 1 electron again. What you'll see is that even when you collect a lot of data, even those singular electrons actually form an interference pattern and not a football pattern. So that is essentially the major problem, uh, major problem that one recognizes as soon as they enter modern physics, when we talk about modern theories of things. This is essentially what is called the dual nature of matter and radiation, in the sense that what is it? Is an electron a particle? Well, if we do the interference experiments, we know that the electron is a wave, in the sense that it gives the interference pattern. But the story does not stop there. Why does the story not stop there? Because what one can do is do another experiment, which is essentially called the photoelectric effect. We will study the photoelectric effect in way more detail further on in the chapter. The photoelectric effect. Now, what is the photoelectric effect talking about? Well, photoelectric effect is essentially saying, if you let's say have photons, that photons, so essentially light that is falling on a metal sheet. Let's say you have a metal sheet. So metals, we know what essentially happens in metals, right? Electrons are more or less free. And you have valence electrons, so hence conductivity and hence all those kinds of properties as well. But you have a lot of electrons which are lurking around. If you give light, well, one of the electrons will absorb the photon, and it will contain enough energy. And if it contains enough energy such that it breaks the bonds of the nearby molecules, well, this electron will go out. But you cannot really explain this without assuming that this wave that is coming here are actually discrete particles. If you assume that this wave was continuous, if you assume, if you assume that this wave was continuous, this experiment would not make sense at all. Because if the wave that is coming in is continuous, then Till when is the electron absorbing the light, and when does the electron know when to leave, and why why is only one electron coming out, and why not multiple electrons are coming out? What one sees is that one photon goes and one electron comes out. This is discrete. This nature is discrete. It's not continuous. So photoelectric effect proves to us that in some cases these radiation itself can behave as discrete, and that is essentially what one is talking about when one is talking about the dual nature of matter and radiation. In the first case, I told you how matter itself can be looked at in the form of wave. For example, electrons can be looked at as waves because they show the interference pattern. And in this from the photoelectric effect, one sees the opposite, that radiation itself can behave discretely and not continuously. So that is essentially what the dual nature of matter and radiation is. Then let's move ahead a bit. Einstein comes along, gives you a wonderful theory, which is the theory of special relativity. One of the consequences of this theory is the amazing Einstein's mass energy equivalence. As the words as the wording suggests, Einstein, what essentially he said was that the mass of any matter, of any particle, of anything, and the total energy that it contains are equivalent to each other. Now, this energy that you're talking about, you know, um, okay, let's not go there. Let's go there in some minutes. Einstein's mass energy equivalence, and the formula is the famous E is equal to mc squared, where E is the energy, m is the mass, and c is the speed of light. So from this equation, essentially what you're seeing is that since C is constant, then your energy is just dependent on it. And the total energy is just equal to the mass. If you work in units, when C is equal to 1, let's say, then E is literally equal to M. So in these units, E is equal to M. But in other units also, there's a conversion factor. There's only a constant that comes in front of us. This is also important, and we will come to the usage of this principle, this principle of equivalence. um, there are a lot of uses of this equivalence principle, especially in cases of when mass actually gets converted into energy. For example, in case of fusion reactions or fission reactions or extreme events like those. um, we will come to that also. um, Okay, we made a prelude. We did talk about this for a second, which is essentially talking about the dual nature of matter and radiation when we were talking about this photoelectric effect. Here, next thing that we need to talk about is essentially what is called the Planck's quantum theory. So Mr. Planck was the first person to essentially realize that that light itself, that radiation itself, can actually be broken up into packets of energy. This realization is, if you think about it, it's not very obvious, right? One does not really know, if until unless one does a certain amount of experiments or has some theoretical understanding of why these things are happening. It's really difficult to know whether radiation should be continuous or discrete. But Planck was the first person to essentially actually come down with a theoretical prediction of how these electromagnetic waves essentially are traveling, and in terms of packets, and what are these packets of energy. And according to his theory, uh, so let's write this down. According to Planck's quantum theory, comma, light. Why is my writing so bad? Light is not continuous, but it is discrete and consists of small bundles or packets. You can call them bundles or packets, whatever you prefer. Packets of energy called, as we called them already, photons. So, according to Planck's quantum theory, light is not continuous, but it is discrete and consists of small bundles or packets of energy, which we are going to call, which we already have been calling, and henceforth will also call photons. This is just repeating. We know what speed these bundles travel at. Well, these bundles travel at the speed of light. Speed of light, which is given to be 3 into 10 power 8 meters per second. Um, Another important thing about these packets of energy is that they have no charge. They have no charge in the sense that in an electromagnetic field, for example, if you have an external electric field or an external magnetic field, and if you pass light through it, there is going to be no change. They have no charge, so essentially no effect from external electric slash magnetic fields. What is the energy of a photon? Well, energy is given in terms of its frequency, um, and it's given by h nu. So this is essentially what Planck came up with, that the energy of a photon is divided into these chunks of h times nu, where h is the Planck's constant, which is given by 6.6 into 10 to the power minus. Do you remember what it was? Minus 36? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, yes.
Units are angular momentum units. What are the units? It's units of angular momentum, right? Angular momentum is I times omega. I is ma squared. So, okay, m squared omega, which is second inverse. I think these are the units, but you can check always. Nu is essentially the frequency of the wave. We've already done some examples of how one goes ahead and calculates, and E is obviously the energy of a photon, of a packet or a photon. So yeah, this is equal to h nu. You can write this in terms of your wavelength as well, simply because you know the relation that nu times lambda is just the speed of light. So hence nu is just c times c divided by lambda. So E is just hc by lambda. So if you're given the wavelength and if you're asked to calculate the energy, you use hc by lambda. Otherwise, you use h nu. It's just easier to remember everything is h nu and then go ahead using these formula. The fact that the multiplication of the frequency and the wavelength will give you the speed of light, and hence one can go. Okay, since we can talk about Einstein did tell us about about the equivalence between mass and energy. So, in essentially saying mass and energy is the same thing. So, if mass and energy is the same thing, can one talk about, let's say, the mass of a photon? But we already said that the photons are massless. So what does it mean for let's see where this goes. Let's see where this goes. Let's do the calculation. Let's see where this goes. Well, Einstein tells us that energy is just your mass times c squared. So this is the equivalence relation. And energy of, let's say, a photon, which is this bundle of energy and moving at the speed of light. The energy of this photon, as we've already seen, is just h nu or hc by lambda. You can consider either. This is equal to mc squared. This implies what is your mass? It's just h nu by c squared, right? Or in terms of lambda, this is h, the c cancels off, by c lambda. It's either this or this. You can use either form. But what does this mass essentially tell us? Well, this mass tells us that this fact essentially tells us that there isn't one kind of mass. There are actually two kinds of masses. One is called the rest mass. The rest mass I will denote as m naught with a zero in the subscript. You call it the rest mass, and the other one we'll call it moving mass. Let's say, which we'll call as m. So there is a difference between moving mass and rest mass. What does this mean? It means that when you're moving at some speed. As you're moving, you gain mass in some form, in the sense that yes, you're gaining energy. You're gaining energy in the form of kinetic energy, half mv square. But because Einstein already said that energy and mass are equivalent, if you're gaining energy, you're gaining mass as well. So there is one mass when you're absolutely at rest. For a photon, the rest mass will be zero, right? So the rest mass m naught of a photon of, let's say, a gamma photon, I'll denote as gamma. So this is for me is a photon. The m naught for gamma is essentially zero. But there is some mass, there is some moving mass because photons are always moving. And the good thing about photons are they're always moving at the speed of light. So it doesn't really matter because all of this is self-consistent at the end of the day. Um, and what is the relationship between the moving mass and the rest mass? Well, Einstein was very helpful in this way also, and he, using his whole theory, one can actually come down to the fact that your moving mass m is actually equal to m naught divided by this factor, which is 1 minus v square divided by c square, where v is the speed of whatever you are moving. Well, from here, what one can see is that, let's say m naught, your rest mass, is just your moving mass multiplied by 1 minus v square by c square. Just to check if everything is consistent, let's just put v is equal to c. What this means is that v is equal to c, so this cancels out with this, and uh, this is just 1, so it's 1 minus 1, which is 0. M naught is 0, so everything is consistent. So m naught can be 0 and you can have a value of m, and nothing really goes haywire. Yes, what one can also do is talk about energy conservation and momentum conservation when it comes to photons. So you can have momentum and energy conservation of photons. Energy conservation, well, we can understand how that will be. Well, the total energy of the is just hc by lambda or h nu. Well, whatever the energy of a photon is, if there are, let's say, n number of photons in a particular system, so the total energy is nh times nu, or nh times c by lambda. um, the total energy should remain constant, as in even if the photon is getting absorbed by let's say the a molecule of air, the total energy of the system will always remain conserved. So conservation of energy is always true, and conservation of momentum also works. So what is the momentum? Well, it's given by u by c, units and all that. You can have a photon which is moving in, let's say, this direction. It collides with, let's say, an electron here. An electron is going in this direction, and the photon is moving in this direction. So the momentum of the photon in the x direction will be given by u by c, and the momentum in this direction, well, it has to depend on the theta here. So if this was p, then p cos theta, and one does that. So this is also u by c. So your energy conservation in the, sorry, your momentum conservation in the x-axis will include the momentum of the photon initially, and in the final case, the momentum of the photon and the momentum of the electron. And that's how these things are very, very useful.